And a 3. Blah, blah, blah.
Blah, 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 blah.
Hi, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co.
I'm Shira.
And I'm Jesse from Quackalope.
Exactly, that's the one. So this is going to be a review of Rolling Heights from AEG, designed by John D. Clear. And if you head on over to this guy's channel, I'll throw a link down below, there's probably a gameplay over there somewhere. I say probably because this is actually being filmed way early in advance, and I have no idea of the timeline of things that actually happened, timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly, and all that. But going into this game, we're going to do a brief overview, how to play, and then start diving down through review segments. And starting off with the how to play, this is a city building, dice rolling, or meeple rolling, push your luck style game. That's a whole lot of words taken at once. If you've played Cubitos or Quacks of Quedlinburg, any style of game, it's going to have some elements like that, where every turn you're going to be rolling your meeples, trying to find the ones that stand up, and then rolling until you have at least half your meeples standing, rinse and repeat as needed, and then potentially push your luck. Once you have half your meeples standing up, you can continue pushing your luck to try to get more meeples standing. And the reason you want your meeples standing is to trade them in for resources, because you're going to keep doing that to start building up buildings. You're going to start getting buildings and then paying the resources on those buildings to get more meeples and more points. That will add more meeples to your little box, where you can continue the next round rolling more meeples, rinse and repeat until you've built out the giant cityscape you've seen before us. You'll score points for building buildings, you'll score points for various cumulative community goals we're all going for. You have private goals, your buildings have situational goals, you have meeples that will roll that will give you in-game points. Rinse and repeat until you run out of one of the 4 resource types, and that will trigger endgame, and someone will end up with the most points. That's basically the game. Did I miss anything?
I don't think so.
Perfect. So, starting off the bat, we're just going to jump straight into it with, it's like we did, we're going to have timestamps down below, you can check out the various sections of the review. We're going to start off with art, theme, and narrative. And I think we'll start with you and narrative, because you like narrative.
I mean, so the core flavor text, the core concept of this game is going to be, right, you're sending your construction workers out onto the block in order to bring resources with them and build a city landscape. The most thematic, or I'd say the deepest thematic level of this, is actually going to be how the buildings relate to the resources that you actually use to build them across the city. So we have a giant glass and marble skyscraper here. We have factories that are built out of steel, and so on and so forth. Or apartment buildings built out of wood and lumber, and you can kind of see a city display itself. Outside of that, there's not a lot more.
So you missed my favorite thematic element. There's only one thematic element I actually care about in the game.
I like the ones about pushing your workers and them going on strike.
That's the one. You're pushing your workers, you're rolling your dice, and then you have to decide, okay, great, you guys are working, these guys need to work harder, and then if you successfully get them to work harder, great.
If you don't, everyone goes on
they
strike.
go on strike, and you end up losing some things. I like that little thematic
You
element.
lose half of them. Yeah, you lose half of them rounded down. That's the pressure luck element of it. I mean, like, when it comes to story and theming of the game, though, there isn't a lot beyond that. I mean,
it's a Euro
game. Even the buildings you have, some of them have names, but I honestly never really pay attention to it. It's much more in the Euro nature of a theme painted onto a game. That being said, I don't know if the game operates as well if it didn't have the theme as the foundation.
Anything else, theme or narrative? There's also art. We can talk about art.
I like the artwork. I think it's pretty. I like the colors involved, the different color meeples,
And this is a prototype.
Yes.
It's very pretty.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what the final copy will be, but this prototype is really nice. I like how, well, this is variability, but I like how everything is just different, and there's so many options.
Yeah.
It's
I would like to see a deluxified version in some form. Spoiler alert, partially because I like the game so much. I would like a, $200 option that makes me have little windows in apartment buildings and like different structures to place on top of this city that you're building, so it actually looks like a metal city landscape. That'll never happen.
AEG's like, people will pay for that? We'll have a conversation.
I mean, listen, I don't think that'll ever happen, but genuinely, if there was an upgraded version of this game, I would heavily consider it, because I really like the display,
Yeah.
and I want it to almost turn into a museum-style diorama by the end of it, not just a couple towers of cubes.
No, I agree with you. I love the way the city builds out in general. The overall art, to me, is take it or leave it. It's fine, I like it, but it's not, like, I'm not, like, blown
It
away
doesn't take
by
away
it.
from the game.
But I do love the way the city builds out,
Yeah.
and more than that, in the component category of things, I love rolling a handful of meeples. There's something ridiculously appealing about it.
It feels very good. They actually land on their sides more than you would expect, and along with that, in the prototype at least, we have nice chunky meeples, which have, I think, a good balance between luck and control. So, something to note.
Cool. Ease of play. How is the game to play?
very easy. It is very easy to teach. You can dive right in. It's really simple to get people started. you're basically telling them you're rolling your meeples, you're trading them in for resources and building your buildings, and the costs are shown. It's a 1, 2, 3.
It's easy to play, but I think strategically it's heavier than Quacks or Cubitos, which is kind of the two comparisons. For me, this comes down much more in a Euro sense to micro points, to endgame scoring, to positioning, to what the tiles are saying when it comes to kind of the final score. And I don't know that I've seen a way to compete in this game if you're not paying attention to those endgame scoring traps.
You have
in one
to
of the
be,
first games we played, I went for on the board direct scoring. Every 7-pointer I could grab, I got. And still endgame screwed me. In a game that we just recently played, I went for rolling yellow. Yeah. Yellow generates points as you play, and I was like, push my luck. Let's play it as much luck as possible. And still, without endgame, without being able to factor in those last few points, there's just not a good way to control for the randomness.
Yeah, I mean, this is a game that has a 50-point scoring track, and multiple times I've seen endgame scoring results in a full looping of the track alone. So if you're not paying attention to the community goals, if you're not paying attention to your hand of cards, or just the general state of what's going on the board, you can easily... My first game with Rena had her 60 points ahead of me by endgame scoring. She still won, but I caught up to within like 3 points of her because she hadn't been focusing on endgame, and I had been.
Yep.
Yeah, and then ease of play, I mean, this is one of those games where when I do this 60-second overview of how to play, I feel like I'm covering 97% in 60 seconds. I don't feel like I'm compromising. It is fairly easy to learn. It's fairly easy to teach. Table space is not that bad. Accessibility, tear up, set it down, all those things are fairly easy.
And one thing to note, which you'll probably see in the gameplay a little bit, but honestly, even more so when we're just playing as a group, after we've done the first few rounds, once we're up and running in this game, we really can take almost all of our turns on our own, which means you're always paying resources, rolling meeples, and continuing the fun of the game, which for me makes this even easier to play because I'm always doing the thing that's fun.
Like
our last
3-player game was what, an hour and 10 minutes, maybe? Somewhere in that range. It was not long at all for a 3-player game. I've consistently seen this game come in the 45 to 90 minute range. If you are playing simultaneously, which works for us, I mean, again, we pause to make sure we're buying our buildings in the right order, but the rest of the stuff doesn't really matter.
The rest of the stuff doesn't. Nope.
Yeah. Which brings us to player count. This is, I believe, let me find that box. I believe this is a 2 to 4
7 to 8.
I don't think it's 1. Is it 1? Do we have a 1 over here? Does it say anything on the
We're
box?
over here.
It's 2 to 4 player. This is a 2 to 4 player game.
Who are you saying 6 to 8?
What? He's just making up stuff. A 2 to 4 player game. I've played this at 2. I've played this at 3. I have not played this at 4. But again, the simultaneous play has me not worried at all about diving in at 4.
Yeah.
This is a game where I think if you're playing it for the first time with 4 players, expect to sequence around the table a few times while you get the sequence going. But for people who know what's going on in this game, I think even a 4-player game will likely not cross the 90-minute range.
I think a 4-player game, the more player interaction on the board will add a lot more to the game.
More tension.
Yeah, I think 2 players, you aren't competing as much for board space, so you kind of can be doing your own things and having less interaction. Like, we had one scoring objective that took away points based on where your buildings were situated. You can really mess with people.
That's going to be a positive or negative, though, depending on how you like to approach and play games. If you want more of a Euro-style game... if you want more of a Euro-style game,
you're right.
a 2-player gaming environment is going to be where you're probably going to enjoy this most. If you like a bit of chaos, a bit of randomness, while still having strategy that you're adapting to, a 4-player game is going to be the sweet spot. And honestly, 3 just kind of merges both. I'm not scared of this at any player count.
Yeah, I completely agree. 2 is probably the player count that I think is the least optimal, but again, it's because I like the conflict and the interaction.
Yeah.
And I very much enjoyed it at 2, but there definitely was less push for the table space and trying to figure out where you can go. 3 is already starting to like wrestle, and 4, I kind of, now that you pointed out, I really kind of want to play
I know, that's
4.
why I brought it up. I'm like, because... the way I was messing with your factories and you were messing with my factories, it would have been so much fun to have a third person messing with both of our factories.
Which brings us to highlights. The things we liked about the game, the things that stood out that make us like this game.
Variability. I love the variability. So all of these land tiles are all double-sided, so the map is constantly changing, which makes it a dynamic map. There are these 3 endgame scoring conditions
from a whole
that
bag.
Totally changed the game. We had one in one of our games where you had to score for having building in every single column. That meant we were trying to spread out as much as possible. This, we were trying to get certain types of building and score for different types that are surrounding it, adjacency.
There's one where you want to have the highest building in each neighborhood, which is a whole different factor of trying to okay, well, I want to be high here and there and there.
Yeah, I love the variability. I like the push your luck mechanism, the control that you still have with the push your luck. Like Jesse was saying, the meeples actually land standing or half tilted pretty frequently.
I thought they were going to be flat so often
I know.
when I first got this
I was
game.
wondering, and it was a lot easier to push your luck than I thought it would be. There are also different meeple colors that allow you to mitigate it a bit. The black ones allow you to reroll. And so I like the mitigation, because that's always my problem with luck games, if there's not enough mitigation.
Yeah. I'm with you completely. The rolling meeples, the general tableau building is amazing. You start off with 4 meeples, and then you're like, okay, great. And then you start building up towards that handful. The maximum you can roll at any given point is 10. But even so, even as you add, you're still trying to optimize around what you need on the board, what meeples you have, what your opponents are doing. The tableau building between the general buildings and the meeples you get is a lot of fun. Watching the cityscape build out is a ton of fun. The variability is actually, I like the variability from the goals. The board variability is nice in the sense that you don't get stuck in pre-scripted sets, but past that, I don't know if it necessarily does things for me.
Depending on what the goals are, I think it makes a difference.
It could matter.
The one where, like, this has a lot, like, depending on how the water is laid out, how easy it is to jump across the water.
Yeah. No, this is accessible, it's easy to teach, it's easy to play, and it's surprisingly rewarding to just have things happen. This is in a weird sense, this is a game that doesn't really, I don't feel like it does anything that different or special, especially once you compare it to Quacksling's Cabidos, where you're having a lot of those same elements. But what it does well, it's very calming, satisfying, and just fun to build things out.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest highlight for myself is honestly going to be the act of grabbing and rolling meeples. Yeah. I like the powers that they have. I like the abilities. I like being able to trigger and unlock things. It feels good to roll, push your luck, and then just generate a pile of cubes. And then, of course, watching the cityscape develop and everything kind of expand. I agree with both of you completely. It's shockingly strategic for a game that involves such a degree of pressure luck. And this chonky meeple rolling device is something that I want. I automatically want more games competing in the space of meeple rolling, where landing on your feet, landing on your side, or landing flat changes the nature of how they operate. I want to see more games utilize this.
And I remember reading the rules the first time and thought, like, that's a little gimmick. I didn't feel I needed it. And
good.
It's a lot of fun.
It is as, if not, potentially more rewarding than dice rolling with customized dice.
Yeah.
I like the decision making you have to make at a certain point when you have too many meeples, and you have to decide what colors you are rolling. And you are kind of constructing, like, what am I going to try for this round? What am I going to try for next round? And I also, the player interaction is, like, key to me. The fact that you can mess with other people, you can take buildings that they have their eyes out, you can take places on the board. I enjoy a lot of player interaction in the game.
Which is something worth focusing on, especially because we talked about how the turns can be simultaneous to a degree. So understanding that even though with the simultaneous turns, you still actually are messing with other people. It's not multiplayer solitaire. We're not just doing our own thing. Yeah. There's a lot of understanding of what's happening on the board. I mean, you won our last game specifically because of the way we were positioned around each other, the way you're getting those extra turns where if I'm paying a bit more attention and trying to get next to you...
I forgot to put a building here, but you got 6 points by taking advantage of one of my buildings.
Which could have been your 6 points. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff going on. And I like something you touched on briefly, but I love how, despite the large amounts of just general similarity going on with the 2 stacks of buildings here, every single time there's always a building I want. It's not like I want any one of those 4 buildings. There's always a building that is perfect for me, a building that works for what I'm doing, which is surprising considering how similar everything is.
One note that I just want to make, and I don't know if it's important for the review or not, but...
Is it on the nitpicks?
No, it's not a nitpick. It's not a nitpick. It's under something that I think was the reason that made these meeple rolling work. These little boxes here. If we were rolling meeples just open and flat, you roll flat all the time. So if you test this, or if you're a designer that's like, let's do this mechanic, this consistently, well, not that time, but consistently is going to result in more odds. This creates a controlled space that allows them to bounce and also allows them to stop at more awkward angles. And on the back of that, if someone is designing, or John D. Clare is watching this and thinking through,
I love how he's just like, let me just try to get as many people as possible. Here's what you do. So do these things.
So
I
want, and this will move into nitpicks a little bit.
Sure.
I want more and different meeples.
Different shapes?
Both. I want both, more powers, more abilities. I want some of their colors to be modular, or I want different ones that have different unlocks, because the more times I play the game, the more I feel like I'm getting into a sequence. And there are different pathways, which are fun to do, but I think after I've played I'd say 10 times, I've explored all the pathways with all the meeples.
So I don't disagree with you to an extent, but start moving into nitpicks.
I'd also love different shapes.
So moving into nitpicks are things like I definitely want more variability. Absolutely, I want them on the buildings. I want the more meeples, all that. I will say I jot down notes when I'm doing things as I think through these reviews. And my first note was after game one. One of my first notes was I don't know if this gets boring after like 5 plays, and I'm like 6 plays in, and I'm still having just as much fun.
Sure.
So I still have the concern, but I haven't hit that point yet. For myself, as far as other meaningful nitpicks, there's going to be 2 small accessibility issues. One is these buildings fall over easier than I would like. And
Although less than you'd expect.
less than you'd expect if you're being careful, but when it does, go ahead, knock it. When it does, trying to reset, that right there, if that happens mid-game, trying to figure out...
That is the most annoying thing to reset.
You're gonna add 7 minutes to your hour-long game.
Which is why they
should
should be made out of metal, which would be less likely to fall over.
Just straight up metal, very heavy.
Also to make a much more satisfying clunk when it does fall.
Yep.
AEG's literally watching this and being like, are people really gonna pay for this?
AEG, we'll pay for it. Just do it.
And then secondly is the text on some of these cards is tiny. One of the problems is this game isn't a very large game to begin with, but when you have all these things across the table, trying to read the text on some of these cards, it's absolutely tiny. I don't know if there's a good way to make it larger while keeping the aesthetic of the game, but I'd like it to be in some way a drop easier without me having to peer. Like, I'm literally right here and I have to pick it up and look
I would
at it.
even be okay with a reference sheet that had iconography on it
The problem is that each building
had the name of the building on it.
That would work.
Interesting.
That
Okay.
would work.
I agree with that.
Because then I could be like, oh, that's the Marquise Park, and I don't need to move meeples or move tokens. I can just check and see what it does.
It's just a slight frustration, especially once you hit that 4-player count and you don't have people looking at the table the same way. You're going to want to have people who are not frequently saying, "Can you pass me that tile? Can you pass me that tile?" So a small little nitpick there.
Especially with a note on things knocking over.
I have 2 nitpicks.
Go for it.
One nitpick is the 4th player color is black. The black
black.
toppers.
Yep.
So if you see the 3-player colors we played with
I thought
are
you were
yellow.
comparing...
No, I was talking. Well, I am going to get to that. But the yellow, the purple, and the green are the 3-player colors we're playing with. These are not building material colors. I know it's a prototype.
Prototype caveat.
Prototype caveat. But the 4th player is a black color. If you stick a black one on top of the navy building tiles, you cannot see whose building that is. And I played with the black color the first time I ever played, and that frustrated me till I changed it out mid-game.
You did do that. I forgot about that.
So that's one nitpick. The other nitpick is the navy and the black meeples are just so similar in color.
Yep.
Maybe marbleize one of them if possible.
Or just different shades. I don't know. Something.
Well,
They're just...
again, with something like this, the odds are they're still doing color checking. I guarantee that's a note that they have on their thing for manufacturing. But it is an important note. So if they are locked into colors and profiles, they need to adjust.
The other nitpick thing that I have is sometimes when you're building a really tall building, you lose track of how many you're on, and you can't see once you put a stack in front the one behind it.
Yeah.
It's just visibility, but it's just a tiny little nitpick. I love the clear ones, actually, that you can still see the number that you're going for. I almost want all of these to be this shade,
it is worth
but
noting,
clear.
on the side of each building they do have the stacks, but still only partially
it's
helps.
It's very tiny, and it's also on the side.
Yeah,
But that's just also, it's another nitpick.
Yep. Anything else?
I don't know that I have major nitpicks outside of what you all have, with the caveat that I'm still curious at what point do I become... At what point do I want an expansion for this? At what point do I want... Well, yes, but at what point does it start taking away from how likely I am to the table of the game?
Yes.
And I still think the range is in that 5 to 10. Now, granted, we're getting closer and closer to that, and I'm not there yet, but unlike you, I do feel that bit of a scratch where I say, okay, what next? Okay, I've done that strategy. But I like twisting things. I like breaking games. I like finding buttons to press, and I'm running out of it.
I already want the what's next. The only point I'm saying is I have that concern, and I think I have the most plays from all of us, and I'm still not the slightest bit bored yet. But I still do wonder if 5 plays from now I am.
Yep.
But I thought that I'd play 1 too.
Already, I kind of want there to be different themes with different cities in, like, the country and the world. Like, this round, you have to build up New York City with all of its skyscrapers, and there'll be very little factories in the city.
I could see scenarios working.
Oh no,
different...
even with how they direct what needs to be built in areas or the resource cost, you could totally build Manhattan Island with the same layout.
Rural Kentucky, Florida with all of the water and the gators and stuff like that, or California, or then even leaving the U.S. and going to other countries.
I think Paris.
I think scenarios could be a really cool situation where the map you're dictating the map based on the scenario, and that kind of dictates the buildings.
It'd be simple enough as like releasing another, 6 of these in a little expansion pack that comes with custom artwork and custom layouts that could either mix in and be randomized.
That's interesting. They've done stuff like this for trains, like where they have little city
That's
map
exactly
packs.
what I'm thinking. Yeah, little map packs.
It's AEG too.
I was just thinking.
Meaningful critiques. Anything that takes away from your experience?
No.
No.
I actually cannot think of anything meaningful. I had my nitpicks, but otherwise it's a glorious games. And it's interesting because we haven't really done a comparison between Quacks and Cubitos, but I feel very strongly about those games. See other videos that we have done.
Oh, we have done Quacks versus Cubitos, just not this one.
I'm saying I feel strongly about those games, and this falls into that genre, and so it's very interesting for me not to have the critiques.
Now, Cubitos is John D. Clare as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, I didn't like that one at all.
Oh, well, we can talk about that some other time. But,
sorry.
But, meaningful critiques for yourself? I have one.
My most meaningful critique is something we've already covered, but it's visibility.
Visibility, okay.
Visibility is going to be my biggest hit point. I think it does detract from the game, especially because this is more strategic, and I need to know what points are being scored where and how, and I don't always have a good sense of that.
So for me, it's just one thing, which is these goals. These target goals you get for your own private little hand. I've seen such a large variation in how good and or easy these are. This one, 2 points for being next to opponent's buildings. In almost every single game I've played, this will score you 10 to 20 points. You can optimize around it. You can get to 20.
I had one that gave you points for how many meeples you got. It was 2 points per meeple, and I had like 15 meeples. That was like 20 to 30 points there.
Versus mine, which was 2 points for every cube above 5.
Which is great if you get those, but it's a little harder.
Those buildings are harder to build as well. I think drafting those could be an easy house rule.
Drafting could be an intriguing concept. Yeah, I like the idea.
Choose the strategy you're going to buckle into.
Choose the strategy you're going to buckle into.
Well, that solves it to an extent. I don't know what degree, and again, prototype, all those things, and also keep in mind our 6 plays or whatever it is, it does not compare necessarily to the degree of playtesting that's been going on, but from a player's perspective, these feel like they are very variable in how good or strong they are, and I'd love to see them, I don't want to say balanced because I don't like saying the word balanced based on 6 plays, but I'd like to see them feel more balanced.
The only issue is when they don't feel balanced and they can lead to the difference between victory, that means there's something, whether or not the math is right, there is something off on them.
Yeah, well, that's something Johnny Pack once talked about. He did a whole article about this, the nature of the difference between mathematical balance versus players' feeling balance, and both are important.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Either way, that's the only real meaningful critique I have. The rest of it is just, like I said, the nitpick stuff. But yeah. Which brings us to final thoughts and ratings.
Are you doing ratings on this one?
I'm still experimenting with different stuff, and this video is like 2 months out, so I have no clue where we settled.
We're doing let's do 10. Let's do a 10-point scale.
10-point scale, fine.
10-point scale for the first time ever.
I have no clue what's actually happening
Swinging
here.
back in, and we're not even doing the bourbon scale, which is very impressive.
Thank the
Would you
Lord.
like me to go first on this?
Go for it.
All right. And I had my
food.
rating on a 1 through 5, so I'm just going to math it up from there, which is a little bit weird. I might give both, just so the audience is...
No.
Are you doing
We're doing 10? All right.
Solid number
We're doing 10.
or
We're doing 10.
decimals?
No. If we're doing 10, we're doing solid numbers.
Okay.
I really like this game. I really, really do. My final thoughts on it are I still want to continue playing it. I'm a little bit sad that we're recording this early because they've asked for us to mail the prototype on, which means we don't get to continue living with it and we don't get to continue playing it. And this is one that we have been excited to bring to the table whether or not we were doing coverage on it. We got to a point where we really didn't feel like we needed...
No, to be clear, I read the rulebook for this game, and I put it back on the shelf because I was like, I don't know what this game is doing differently. I just rather play Cubitos.
I'm talking after we played it.
Oh, after, okay.
Yeah, not the first time, not the first time. But after we played it, I've been excited to get to the table whether or not I needed to do coverage on it. We hit a point where I didn't feel like I needed more gameplays to cover it, but I still was down and wanted to continue playing it. This one, with the caveats that we have, with the criticisms around sort of final strategy, wanting a little bit more variability, and visibility being my biggest meaningful critique, I think it's sitting at a 7 out of 10. It's high, it's solid, it's very good. I'm happy to play it. It's not a perfect game, though, and there's still a lot of things I'd like to see between now and when the Kickstarter launches, and when it actually gets to me in a finished copy, that will likely bump it up.
I know you like going last,
Yes,
so I'll go
I
ahead.
want to hear what yours is.
I'm not going to beat around the bush over here. This is an 8 out of 10 for me. I really enjoy it. The takeaway from being higher is not so much any meaningful critiques, the small things, nitpicks, things like that, but rather I would say the type of game it is, to a certain extent, is more peaceful, relaxing, roll your meeples, have fun with it. The strategy is 100% there. Are lots of ways to optimize, lots of strategies to pursue, lots of things like that. at the same time, there's a cap to what this game is doing or allowing me to do. Solid game, really enjoy it, an 8 out of 10.
This is going to be a 9 out of 10 for me. I really like it. The nitpicks and the critiques are what's keeping it from being like a 10 out of 10. But, so it's a 9 out of 10 right now. I can see if the variability doesn't change it up after like 10, 15 plays, it might drop down to an 8 or a 7,
Sure.
where you guys are holding at. But right now, I'm excited when it comes out. I have a really good time. And it's weird because usually I'm very into winning, and this one I was just playing to have fun. I was like, I don't even know what I'm doing, but I kind of like messing with you.
She won.
I did win, but I didn't know if I was going to win until the end. Usually I have a feeling,
It was
and
close,
usually
too.
I'm like aiming towards winning. So it's like, okay, I have a very vague idea of what the scoring objectives are going to be, and I'll aim towards them. But also, like, I just really wanted to build these 2 massive skyscrapers that I succeeded in.
It's very satisfying.
And it was just, it's a lot of fun. So
Yeah.
that's where it's holding
I
at.
don't disagree with you. This is a solid game. This is Rolling Heights from John D. Clare and AEG. I'll throw a link down below to the Kickstarter whenever it is. Again, I don't know exactly when this video is going up. Kickstarter, I believe, probably sometime in February. If things don't change between now and then, we'll see. Either way, link and information and all that will be in the description down below. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co.
I'm Shira.
And I'm a duck.
And have a good one. Such a delay there. Such a delay. You said have a duck, and I just paused like it's over.
No, I didn't say have a duck. I said I'm a duck.
I have a duck.
And you were supposed to follow up with...
I'm a good one.
They have a duck? That's a duck.
Quack.